What is a good music student? You are. Because you're listening to Music Student 101. Here are your hosts, Jeremy Burns and Matthew Scott Phillips.
Welcome back, everybody. Well, 6 episodes in, and I'm already on my 3rd apology. But this one isn't for the wind players or the brass players, and it's more of a preamble than an apology, I suppose. I'm actually recording this a day or two prior to the release of this podcast. The podcast itself, Good and Bad Study Habits, was recorded a couple of years ago when myself and Matt were still trying to determine the direction of this project. And at the time, our intended listener really was more the music student, someone in a college or classroom atmosphere. Now, since then, I think we've decided to try and open it up and broaden it a bit towards the musicians who just want to know more about music and the study of music. So there will be theory, there will be advanced topics, there will be discussions on things such as melodic dictation, harmonic dictation, sight reading, things that do occur in the classroom environment. But we will try to keep those discussions fairly limited and as relatable as we can to all of you other listeners. Nevertheless, we decided to air it anyways because I know there's a lot of music students out there that will gain a lot from this information. And there might also be some cool tips and tricks for people who aren't actually college students. So I hope you enjoy the episode. And without further ado, here it is. Good and Bad Study Habits. All right, man. Isn't this exciting?
It is very exciting.
You're in college now.
Woohoo!
What are you going to do? You're learning the ropes.
Yeah, you're learning the ropes. You're learning how much beer it takes before you pass out. You know, you're learning all sorts of other
Life skills.
life skills. Not that one.
And speaking of life skills, let's talk about the skill of being a student, because if we don't cover this early on, it could come down on us in the long run.
Yeah,
right?
you can sort of find yourself circling the toilet bowl faster than you realize, because college can be a lot harder than anything you've been challenged with up until now. Not just the life stuff, but the intellectual learning, tackling academic subject stuff too. This material is hard.
Balancing your school and work schedule.
Yeah,
All kinds of challenges, really.
Yeah, not just knowing how much to study, but knowing how to study.
That's big. That's big.
Yeah.
And we're going to cover that. And a lot of this is going to seem like common sense.
But then again, it bears repeating and bears being said, because there's a lot going on. And in college, sometimes you really are thrust into what can be a very challenging environment with not a whole lot of preparation. So it's important to have a good, clear idea of what you need to do. Not just I know I need to study, but know how to study and know sort of the tricks that help people survive college.
Yes, and this won't be as much of a musical segment. This is more about just being a good student.
More about just being a good student, but it definitely applies to your music classes. And some of these skills even apply even more to your music classes than they would to something else, because you have to practice when you're a musician, not just study.
I concur. Well, let's get into the very first one, shall we?
All right, yeah, well, the first thing, and this may seem like a no-brainer, but it still definitely bears being said, come to class. Really, you miss a class and you are missing information. You're missing your chance to interact with your professor and with your other classmates regarding that information. You're really just doing yourself a big disservice every time you miss class. You should only miss class in the most dire of emergencies. I try to never miss anything.
What does it say to your instructor if you miss a class? I mean, in theory, it shouldn't really play. It should be all about your test scores and everything. But surely there's a little bit of a
well. What it can say to your professor. Now, every professor's personality is different, of course. They're all different people, but it can give the impression that you're not very serious. And when your professor feels that you're not very serious, he can find himself struggling to take you seriously as a student. When you come up halfway through the semester, 3/4 of the way through the semester, and go, "Oh man, I'm failing. What do I do here, Doc?" It's not that he will want to help you more if you were in class every day, but at that point, there's very little that he can do to put you back on the right track. he's a busy guy.
I'm sure it's frustrating too. I mean,
a busy woman, as
or
the case
either,
may be.
either way, if a student is slacking the whole quarter of semester and then comes to you and says, "Hey, I'm drowning here, help me out," like, come on.
Yeah, and it's not that you don't want to help him out, but at that point, there's not a lot you can do. There's not a lot that you can, other than impressing upon him the need to change some of his habits, or impress upon her the need to change some of her habits. There's not much else that they can do. You want to head that off at the pass. You don't want to be that person who has to come to their professor halfway through a semester because their grades are sinking.
Just makes it stressful for everyone.
Makes it stressful for everyone. You especially. No one will be more stressed than you.
Right. Let's try to avoid that.
Yes.
Now, there may be some other ways to head off this stress at the pass, like finding ways to increase your focus, maybe based on where you sit in the classroom.
Usually on the first day of class, this is a type of pecking order that gets established as people walk in the door the first day. Where you sit in a class, believe it or not, where you sit can make a big difference on how easy you find it to tackle that class. Generally, people who sit at the front hear better, they see better, they're more engaged. There's actually a wonderful article in USA Today by a professor by the name of Chris Hakala. Dr. Hakala is a psychology professor and director of the Center for Teaching and Learning at Western New England University. He makes some very good points. One of the points he makes is that sitting at the front of the class, while it won't statistically turn a bad student into a good one, what you can definitely get is a better rapport with your teacher. Your teacher knows who you are. They know your personality. They know the kind of questions you want to ask. They are more likely to be engaged with you and you with them. You are more likely to pay attention. It is very easy to get distracted in the back of the class, even if you don't want to be distracted, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But even if you don't want to be distracted, it is very, very easy for people around you to be talking, to be on the internet, checking out their Facebook page or whatever. It is much easier to ignore that kind of stuff if it's all going on behind you because you're at the front of the class. Really good article about that we should definitely check out, and we can put the link to that up on our website.
Can and will. Now let's talk about some things that might divide our focus, maybe things we haven't even thought about yet. One thing that comes to mind would be engaging in the fine art of multitasking.
Right, and when we say multitasking, a lot of people take that word to mean doing things like texting while also being on Facebook, while also tweeting, just adding on one thing after another. Your primary focus in the classroom should, of course, be what's going on in the class. There has been a lot of research done very recently on multitasking and its effect on your ability to learn. An article published recently in the Higher Education Journal concluded pretty damningly that students who multitask have lower grades. And that is definitely true. It goes back to the paying attention thing, that you can't absorb this information if you're not devoting it to, if you're not giving it your full attention. And a lot of it is very intuitive. A lot of it is not empirical information that can kind of be coming in one ear while a whole lot of other things is coming in another. It takes a certain amount of effort to understand. That's true with any subject, but it is certainly true with your music classes.
Oh, another thing about multitasking is, you're disrupting the people around you. It's, the students around you. If I was a teacher, it just puts up a big red flag if someone's over there distracting the rest of the class.
Different professors have different levels of annoyance where it comes to people being a distraction in their class in general.
Mm-hmm.
I knew a professor once who would literally throw you out of the room if your cell phone went off. On the other side, I've also known professors who would let themselves get distracted by what the other students were doing. And of course, the students who were trying to learn found that very annoying. You can bet that if you're not giving your professor your undivided attention, he's not going to like it. And worse than him not liking it, you're not there for him, you're there for yourself. Worse than him not liking it, you are making it impossible to absorb the information yourself, and you can be challenging other people's ability to take on that information. Typewriter clicks are loud, clicking your keyboard is loud. When somebody gets a tweet or a text, those are sounds that are very distracting, especially to music students who are trained to listen to things like that.
Right. I know that melody. Yeah, that should bring us to another bad habit. Having your phone ringer on while you're in class. Turn your ringers off.
Yes, turn your ringers off, please. Students and professors alike. I've seen them both do it, and yes, it's distracting. And please turn it to silent. I'll admit rather guiltily that when I was a student, I would occasionally check my phone to see whose calls I had missed and things. But if your phone is in your hand for more than 2 minutes in class, then I would say you probably crossed the line. You should probably put it up and get back to paying attention to the class.
It seems like in high school it was almost kind of cool to be the guy that slept in class. You showed you just didn't care.
For me in high school, it was sort of the cool kid persona to not care, to be in the back asleep or otherwise engaged. I'm afraid I may be dating myself back that way. I think that may generationally that's not maybe not as much the case now.
Yeah.
Students are much more committed to their futures even at the high school level now. Mm-hmm. But you still get people who will fall asleep, and this is the worst case scenario for everyone. This is the worst case scenario for you, obviously. It is the worst case scenario for anyone around you, because even if you're not snoring, and believe me, kids fall asleep in class and they snore, and it annoys everybody.
I used to have that thing where I would snore and it would wake me up, and I'd be like, oh wait, did I dream that I snored and it woke me up, or did I just snore and it really loud enough to wake me up? So surely it was loud enough to disrupt the class.
Exactly, and there are people, who will snore and wake themselves up, and that's great. And there are people who don't have that wonderfully convenient little reflex. They will just sit back there and snore and snore and snore.
Oh god,
all the way through theory, and
that would drive me crazy.
Yeah, I saw that happen once with and the professor of the class was a very intelligent man and a very well respected theorist, and the student in the back of his class was just snoring away. Your professor's there to help everybody. He treats all of his students equally. Having said that, if when you come back into the classroom or come into his office, halfway through the semester and say, my grades are really, really bad, what can I do? He's just going to say, well, stay awake in class.
I'll tell you what you could have done.
Yes, exactly, yeah. I'll tell you what you could have done. You could have tried, getting a couple hours of sleep before you came in. And, a lot of these classes, especially when you're a freshman and a sophomore, a lot of these classes are at 8 o'clock in the morning. It's brutal. We all went through it. We all had these classes that were really early in the morning, and it's really difficult. My thing was to always say, do what you have to do. If you need a thermos full of coffee like I do to be awake, then do that. If you need to have that Red Bull so you can stay awake in class, and then go home and crash, do that. But it is vitally important that your waking hours be in the classroom. So.
To musicians, that's a challenge, because I think most musicians I know, certainly myself, are prone to being night owls.
We are definitely night owls.
If you're gigging by the time you get into college, you are a night owl for the most part.
Absolutely, yeah. And I don't think very many people give up their band when they get into college, especially not very many music majors. So a lot of those guys, a lot of you students out there are still gigging. Mm-hmm. Going into college. So it is very difficult to do that, to get a good night's sleep and to be up and awake. But it is nevertheless absolutely crucial.
Yeah. And we're not saying it's easy by any means, are we?
Absolutely not. No, that actually bears saying. This is not easy. These are skill sets.
Right.
Studying habits or skill sets. Playing an instrument is a skill set. Theory, believe it or not, is a type of skill set. Looking at a piece of music and seeing the chord progression and understanding what that means is a type of skill set. You're learning how to do things. You're not just learning things that you know. It's very, very challenging, and you need to develop some good skills to help you do that. So speaking of good skills, Jeremy, did you study in groups much when you were in college?
I did a pretty good bit actually, and I think the advantage of that was just it's one of those things where it's if I tell myself I'm going to study at 4 o'clock today, I may or may not do it at 4 o'clock today.
Right.
But if I know that I will inconvenience a bunch of other people and be a jerk if I don't show up at 4 o'clock and get the job done, then it pushes me a little bit more to do that. So if anything, for me, the main reason was just to motivate myself to get out there and do it, to get it done. And there's always going to be a person who knows a little bit more than everybody else, and that can be a very handy thing. On the other hand, you do not want to be a study mooch.
Yes.
We should talk about the study mooch.
Do not be a study mooch. This is something that I was different. I did not spend a lot of time studying in groups when I was in college. I probably should have more than I did, but one of the reasons I didn't was because these people really annoyed me. There was these people and I call them the study mooch, my personal nomenclature. This is somebody who comes to a study group session having not studied by himself at all, or having not studied by herself at all, and comes to this session basically expecting the other people in the group to teach them what they're going to need to know to pass the test or pass the quiz or what have you. They bring no valuable information of their own into the group. They're just there to mooch off what everybody else has learned by studying their notes and paying attention in class and being
Showing
on top
up.
of their game. By showing up.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. Don't be one of these people. For one thing, of course, it bothers your fellow classmates in your study group. You will find that you make a lot more friends and get invited to a lot more study groups if you bring valuable information to the table.
Right.
And to me, the best kind of study group there is a study group in which everybody has studied a lot on their own and has a sort of basic grasp on the material. And when you come into the study group, you sit down, so you say, let's cement our grasp of this material together.
Right.
Let us all absorb what everybody in the group knows, so that we all come out with the knowledge that everybody has instead of just the knowledge that the individual has. You can't do that if you come in with no knowledge.
Right.
You're the weak link in the chain. So
In fact, you're holding people back.
you are definitely holding people back. And I'm a selfish student, so I always say, even more importantly than annoying and holding back your classmates, you're annoying and holding back yourself. This does not work. It is near impossible to come into a study session knowing nothing and absorb the amount of information you need to do well on the test. That is never going to happen. Studying in general is not a supplement for learning and absorbing the information that you learn in class. And group study is not a substitute for individual study.
Right.
I like to get together with groups as a big test is coming up, starting maybe a week before the test or maybe 2 weeks before the test, and start studying together then to shore up what I know with the information held by my esteemed classmates. But that is after I've spent a considerable amount of time studying on my own, because that's where I get the information that I'm going to bring to the study group, and that's where I'm getting the bulk of my information is from my own study. Please, please, please don't never look at this stuff outside of class and then the day before the test think you're going to come in and sit down at the library with 4 other students who are doing really well and just absorb enough to make a grade comparable to what they will make. That is just not the way it works.
I think that leads us into the next point.
Do not cram.
Don't cram. We had it. The other day we were talking about this, and we had an analogy between a good diet, good eating habits, and good study habits. It's the same thing.
Absolutely, it is. Just like you don't want to eat a huge amount of food in a single sitting and expect that to go through the day. You want to eat, moderate meals throughout the day. Your brain's absorption of knowledge is very similar. The brain really can only absorb information for about 15 minutes to a half hour. After that, it starts to struggle. So if you're thinking that you're going to sit down and study all night and absorb all of this information at one time, your brain is really working against you because your brain doesn't want to learn that way. It's much, much better to do it in short spurts.
Right.
Well, really, I'm a nerd. I start studying for a test as soon as the test before that is over. I get the grade back. It's like, okay, and I start studying for the next test. But at the very least, a couple of weeks, 2.5 weeks out of a test, I'll start to study, and not much, 30 minutes a day.
Dip your toe in it.
Right, exactly. And then, that'll, as the test approaches, that'll increase to an hour that I spend studying, and then to an hour and a half. 2 hours is probably the max that I spend at any one time studying for a test. And as I study, I will look at the initial material. When I come back to it on the next day, I will look at that plus that much more. And I will come back the next day, look at all of that, and add some to it, so that by the time I've gotten to the night before the test, I'm not trying to cram a whole lot of information that I'm really not very familiar with, into my brain. It's really just me reviewing at that point stuff that I have seen many times over already, and I'm very comfortable with.
Isn't that so much nicer than seeing something for the first time the night before the test?
Yeah, it's amazing how students hate you sometimes, when, or really, they don't hate you, of course, but you can come in and be so calm and so unstressed, at least compared to your classmates who are freaking out about this test and about how little they remember, and you can walk in and not be the person with their nose in their notes, frantically trying to learn something in the 5 minutes before. It's really a nice contrast. There's actually, if you don't want to take my word for it, there's a psychologist in South Florida named Doug Rohrer, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right, who did a study on students who were cramming, who were doing last-minute studying. And he claims very much that it reduces the retention of material and even may hinder the learning process in the long term, even may hinder your ability to learn going forward, not just for this one test. Wonderful article. If you're interested, you should check that out. It's in the Science Daily, and we can put that link up on our website.
Yep. I think the only thing we have left here is asking questions. I think it's a good habit to ask questions. If you don't know if you don't know what's going on, get clarification. There's nothing wrong with that. It's more about timing, isn't it?
It is more about timing. People have different times at which they feel comfortable asking questions, and that is great. Some people are hand raisers. They will raise their hand in the middle of class to ask questions.
Much better than blurting out, by the way.
Much better than blurting out. If you blurt out a question, you'll still get your question answered, but you're running the risk of, in a lot of situations, your professor may very well, he's going to finish his thought before he really pays you any attention. So, you might as well save yourself some trouble, be courteous, raise your hand. I guarantee you, most professors are, eager to answer any questions that anybody has. It gets tiresome hearing ourselves talk all the time. But some people definitely ask questions during class. That is great. That makes the class vibrant. Everybody likes that. If you're sitting in that class asking that question, there's a chance that at least a couple of more people besides yourself had that question and just haven't raised their hand to ask it.
Right.
So you're benefiting yourself. You're benefiting your classmates. It's a great thing. Not everybody feels super comfortable asking a lot of questions in class.
Right.
They don't like the attention being drawn to themselves.
Right.
And that's okay. Professors often are hanging around after class. For no other reason than, they have to gather up all their stuff, turn off the overhead, projector, or whatever else they have to do.
Close up shop, yeah.
Close up shop in general. It is a good time to approach your professor one-on-one and ask some quick questions about something that you may not understand. Professors, I can only speak for myself, but I have gotten into some pretty involved conversations after class that went from something about a major scale that evolved in teaching this student how does somebody solo on a guitar? What does that happen, and how would that look if he had notated that on music? And of course.
That's the big question in my mind. How the hell do you solo?
Yeah.
I'm still working on that.
Yeah. The timeless question about guitar. See, my dad once asked me, how do you know where to put your finger? I thought that was the most fundamental question about guitar playing that could be asked.
How do you know where to put your finger?
How do you know where to put your finger? But so after class, great time to talk to your professor. If you feel like what you have to talk to him about is more in depth, maybe you just really need a more general understanding of something, or you feel like you would really like to have sort of a longer conversation where you don't have somewhere else to be and he doesn't have somewhere else to be. I have definitely seen this, just as an anecdote amongst professors. We all have our office hours. They're 2 hours at least, a couple of days a week. We all have them. We all have to be there. This is time that we specifically set aside to be in our office.
It's a requirement, even.
It is a requirement. It is. We are required to have these times available, these times where we make ourselves available, and no one ever comes to see us at our office hours. We sit there and update our Facebook statuses, check out Farmville, and surf the internet for interesting articles and things. For 2 hours every couple of days a week, because no one ever comes in to see us and to talk to us. Please come see your professor during his office hours. It will break up the time for your professor, and he's there for you. This is time he's made available for you.
It can bring up your professor's quality of life to an extent.
It can. You'd be amazed. A lot of the times you might be surprised how cool a guy your professor is, or how cool a chick your professor is.
Honestly, that's very true, man, because it wasn't until some of my best relationships in the college experience didn't happen until after I made that first office visit. And it's just, simple clarifications, little things,
Absolutely.
But yeah, I really made some really good friends, actually.
Absolutely. Again, it's building a rapport with your professor. It will help. It will help you do well in this class. It will help you understand what is expected of you to do well in the class. And yeah, absolutely. You can actually make some great friends. And these are people that are in the line of work that you want to be in.
Absolutely.
Very often. These are people that are, professional musicians, professional music theorists.
Mm-hmm.
These are people who are accomplished composers. These are people who can help you.
Right. Absolutely.
And it's amazing how much good you can get out of on so many levels, just being there and being somebody that your professor knows, that he or she knows, that is willing to come and talk to him about practically anything.
Well, I think that's about it for right now as far as study habits go. Good things to keep in mind throughout your college experience and really throughout your career as a musician.
Absolutely. And if you need more information, you can always visit our website, musicstudent101.com.
And if you have any questions or comments, maybe you have some other ideas about how to be a good student, you can email us at info@musicstudent101.com.
We would love to hear your feedback.
You may have some of your own study tips. Feel free to email them and/or your questions and comments to info@musicstudent101.com.